Hey, coming up on today's episode, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, control. No, just kidding. But actually, we are going to talk about how important it is to understand what's under your control and what's not under your control, what's in your sphere of influence and what isn't as you plan for retirement and think about your finances. It's all part of an important retirement equation that we're going to break down on today's episode. I'll grab Scott and we'll get started.
Let us help you reach your peak in retirement. It's time for Your Retirement Elevated.
Hey, another episode of Your Retirement Elevated. Walter Storholt alongside Scott Dugan. Another great episode is here, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. We are in summer at the recording. We're at the end of July, and we've got highs in the 80s and down in the 60s at night. I'm in heaven.
Nice. We got rid of a little bit of that crazy heat wave that we had, and now we can just relax a little bit.
I wish that was. I'm going to absorb as much as possible, but I'm sure it's going to be short-lived.
We're talking about the retirement equation today. I think good weather might be part of that equation, right?
Well, it is one of those things would fall into the category of out of your control.
That's true.
Sure.
That's true.
But this is actually the retirement equation. It's been around. It's a concept been around for a while. And I actually used to start our college educational retirement classes with this concept. And so I thought, this is about time. Let's share it today. Because in today's world, and at the time of this recording, we're in July 2024. When we talk about control, I tend to like control. I don't know about you, Walter.
Sure, I'm right there with you.
Maybe a little too much.
I think that's pretty par for the course for any small business owner, right? We're pretty into controlling things and have to kind of keep that in check a little bit.
But what I have noticed as I've grown as a business owner and a person is really being able to look at things where, hey, there's some things that I have total control over, right? There's some things I have some control over. And then there's a big group of things that I have zero control over, out of my control. And so when, looking at life, I like to break those things into those three categories. And today we're going to talk about retirement and retirement planning and really talk about, hey, what are the things that you really can control, things you kind of have a little control over, and what things you got to just let go of to have ultimate happiness in retirement.
I love breaking it down like this because we break things down into buckets in other ways when we talk about finances and retirement. You've probably heard like bucket planning and things like that. I love that our buckets today are all about control, a totally different way of kind of looking at the retirement equation, as you've aptly kind of named this episode. So where do you want to start? Where do you usually begin the conversation with people? Is it those things that we can't control or that total control segment?
My favorite, total control.
Okay.
That's where I would like to start.
I guess the saying goes, focus on the things you can control. That comes first in that saying, right? So that is a logical place.
Yeah, we'll start there. So one thing that we have total control over when we do retire or getting ready to retire are our saving versus our spending. And so, we have control of our purse strings, our checkbook. And so we have that control of the balance of, when we retire, we're going to have money coming in, probably Social Security checks, maybe a pension, maybe part-time income. Our spending is what we spend on life. We talk about essential spending on the things you have to have, and then the discretionary expenses, which are things you'd like to have. We have control over those to a great extent. And if there's that mismatch between money coming in versus money coming out, that's where that income gap comes about. We've talked about that on other episodes. But we do have, especially on the spending side, we can control those things. And so I would say that's the biggest lever we could pull. The way to move the needle the most is really focusing on having control over that. The other piece that we do have control of is where we place our investments, our asset allocation. And asset allocation is really about, you talked about buckets earlier. I talk about baskets. We want to have multiple baskets with a lot of eggs in those baskets, and we want to protect those baskets. Okay. And so how we are wired, our tolerance for risk, which is really how much can you stand the up and down value of your money? There's a range. Some people have a very wide range. Some people have a very narrow band that they can tolerate. And so where you place your money in different assets, different investments, you have control over that. And so most of the time when we're looking at asset allocation, we first start with, what do you need your money to do? What do you have to have it provide a paycheck? Does it need to make up for taxes and inflation? Does it need to provide for a long lifestyle or a long lifespan? If you bake all those things in, then you go to, what baskets do I put things in? So those two things, I believe you have total control when it comes to retirement.
Is your retirement journey truly tailored to your needs? In his book, Exceptional Retirement: Tools and Strategies for Retiring on Your Own Terms, Scott Dugan addresses the crucial questions all retirees ask. Discover the power of a clear financial decision-making process that can prevent major retirement mistakes and unlock exceptional opportunities. In the book, Scott outlines 4 essential questions that guide retirees toward successful outcomes. Don't miss out on key insights that could define your future. Available now on Amazon. Click the link in the description of this episode to get your copy of Exceptional Retirement.
I would like to throw a curveball at you. What do you think about emotions? Because I don't see that on the graphic anywhere. And I think, we would like to think we can control our emotions, but maybe that's a segue into the some control, since sometimes we do struggle to control those emotions a little bit. Do you see that fitting into the conversation anywhere?
I think that's a great point. None of us are strong enough to overcome all emotions.
Right.
And we're emotional beings. And, we work with a lot of engineers, for example, a lot of technical people in our work. And I always think about, if we think about Volvo, as a vehicle, what do we think about? We think about safety, right? It's all that data, safest car on the road. Well, so we think, that data that we're given about Volvo, we're making logical decisions. And in reality, we're having an emotional decision about the data that's presented to us, because it gives us an outcome or a potential outcome of feeling safe because we're driving this, safe vehicle. And so none of us can, again, override all of our emotions, but we can keep them in check. And one of the things we do, kind of going back to control, we can control the messages that are going into our brain. And that's about controlling the media and the inputs that we have. We can all control how much time we spend on our phones. We can all control how much time we spend on the internet or watching, talking us on TV or reading the financial news. We have control over that, because, the things that are out of our control are market returns. Like, we have zero control over those things. I wish I could say I do, but none of us do.
Right.
So being inundated by information on a daily basis about the markets and their conditions, is that really helping the quality of our life? Are we using that information to make quality decisions? More than likely we aren't, especially when we're talking about consumption of media. And right now, coming off probably one of the craziest weeks of an election year, for sure, I would say that emotions are running high. There's a lot of things coming at us, a lot of data, and a lot of those things, again, are out of our control, to do that. So again, the emotions, it's not what happens to us, it's how we react to things for the most part. And so if we've got a good investment discipline, if we've got a good written plan in place, that's what's going to help us stay the course, stay the path. Always knowing we need to be flexible enough to, if life throws us curveballs, we've got to be able to make some changes. But again, we can't control market returns, just like we can't control tax policy.
Right.
We can't control benefits policy. Now, can we try to vote for the politicians that seem most aligned with our beliefs? Absolutely. But are we going to single-handedly, affect regulatory changes?
Still not really control at that point.
We don't have control. That's out of our control.
Yeah.
So the markets, the economy, tax policy, benefits policy, those are really out of our control for the vast majority of us.
Makes a
So,
lot of sense. Yeah.
and so that's the opposite. We have total control, we have out of our control, and then in the middle, we've got some control.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, employment earnings and how long we work. And that's usually a big decision for a lot of people is when they're at their peak earning capacity, in their later years, 50s and 60s, it can be tough to leave that money behind. You're like, man, if I'm at my peak earning capacity, making the most money ever, and maybe putting the most amount of money away. So you do have control of, to a large extent, can you continue to work? Now, what if health throws us a curveball? That may change all that. What if we're downsized? Out of our control. But if we're in a solid position, we're adding value to a business or a company, then we can probably continue to work. Perfect example, a lot of our clients are in the engineering space in Kansas City and around the country. And the great thing about the engineering space is that a lot of companies will allow you to go from full-time to more of a part-time situation. And so you may be working, 40, 50 hours a week, but maybe you drop down to 3 or 4 days per week. You still get great income. You're still providing value. You're around a team of people, your coworkers. You still usually get benefits in that scenario. And you can transition through full work, 3/4 work, half-time potentially, and really phase yourself out that way. So that's one great thing about the engineering space that we've seen for a long time is your ability to dial it back on your terms. So I think
you can't beat that kind of flexibility, right? In any industry.
Yeah. And so very, very, again, very prevalent in that space. And that's where, whether it's, the defense contracting space, we have electrical engineers, metallurgical engineers, the people that make brake pads, civil engineers, you name it. We've got the span of that. So we definitely see that. And the other we have some control of is just our longevity.
I was kind of surprised, to be honest with you, to see that one in that category.
And now, can we do everything right? Can we get great sleep? Can we hydrate? Can we, great food, take our vitamins, brush our teeth, do all those things and still have health problems? Absolutely. That is without a doubt can be possible. But I do think if we can stay active and make good choices, I think you and I both over the last couple of years, we've made better choices with our life. And I would say the quality of our life is much better. And I like my odds having a longer lifespan, being healthier now than I was 3 years ago.
We're at least putting ourselves in the best position to increase that longevity. There's the control, I suppose. Yeah.
And so we have some control of those things. So again, it comes down to this balance of things and say, hey, what's coming at me? What the information I have, hey, do I have control over it? Do I have any control over it? Do I have zero control over it? And if we can start parsing things out and making better decisions, I think it goes back to your point. We can make decisions based on facts, logic, a process. And if we can avoid making emotional decisions on a lot of things that count in retirement, I'm not saying you need to be a stoic all the time. Let's have some emotion. Let's have some fun. When it comes to retirement and staying the course, balancing those 3 areas out and charting a good course forward is extremely important in retirement.
Excellent, Scott. It's a great breakdown. I love looking at retirement through this kind of lens and talking about these different elements of control. I think it puts it in a new light, at least for me, and hopefully it does for our viewers and listeners as well. If you want to talk a little bit more about retirement planning, maybe where your emotions play into account here, talking about these elements of control and how to do all of it properly, don't ever hesitate to reach out to Scott. In fact, it's very easy to touch base. You can call 913-393-4724 or go online to listentoscott.com. Listentoscott.com. We've got lots of great resources for you on the website. Check the description of today's show for more info as well and ways to get in touch. Scott, great episode today. Thanks for all your help and guidance.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, we'll talk to you again next week. Come back and join us next time right back here on your Retirement Elevated.
Investment advisory services offered through Elevated Capital Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.